Welcome to ABTV, giving you a front row seat to the work happening across the MWRA service area. In this episode, we're sharing the audio from a live workshop on private inflow and infiltration, hosted by the MWRA and the Advisory Board. You'll hear from staff and community leaders tackling this challenge on the ground. Because this was a visual presentation, we encourage you to check out the video version on our website or YouTube channel for slides and other materials that help bring the content to life. Let's dive in. Thank you everyone for coming. Again, I apologize that we had to take care of business before the workshop. To appreciate everyone's patience if you were attending. Inflow and infiltration, as you all know, is a challenge in every wastewater system across the country. And while MWRA and its member communities have made real progress on the public side, the private inflow remains one of the most persistent and complex pieces of the puzzle. And that's what we're going to focus on today. And to hear from some of our communities that are actively working to address that. So we're especially glad we've got Brian White, our voting member from Burlington, as well as Megan Cavalier, who are going to be presenting on some of Burlington's efforts. And we have Nick Rystrom, who will be joining us and sharing Revere's program and what they have done. They're going to walk us through what their communities have done and what others might look like, what might take away rather from their experiences. And you know, the work is it's helpful to be able to share resources, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do more as an advisory board is make sure that we provide that resource for you all. And toward that end, if anyone has any suggestions for other future workshops we could hold or other areas where you think that we could be of value to help you out, let us know. We're already working with MWRA and a few other things, so stay tuned on that. And with that, I think that's it. Kristen, I believe I'm turning it over to you. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. I'm Kristen Hall. Good morning. I'm the Senior Program Manager for MWRA's Community Support Program. Thanks everybody for being here today for this important conversation. We're going to jump right in, but before I do, I just want to say thanks to Matt and his staff for helping us get this together. There's a lot of logistical stuff that goes into doing these things, so I appreciate all your assistance. So moving on, we can go right to the first slide there. So basically starting with some definitions, what is II? Infiltration is water that enters the sewer system via physical defects. And inflow is stormwater that enters the system via direct connections. So we're going to dive into those a little bit in a moment, but an important point to note is on the next slide that shows us that approximately 45 to 50% of the flow that goes to Deer Island is infiltration and inflow. We put together a visual representation of that for you on the next slide of our data from last year. So if you don't know, MWRA has about 200 meters across the regional system in community sewers and MWRA sewers that we utilize in our rates process. Our metering group reviews the data, cleans it up, compiles it into a flow number for each community per month. And then my group takes that community level data and estimates three components. So the three components are the sanitary flow, which is the brown line at the bottom of the graph. And that's flow that's coming from residences and businesses. Infiltration, that's the light blue on the graph. And inflow, which is the darker blue color at the top. The green bars represent the total rainfall for each month. So you can see how high the infiltration and inflow are in the wetter, like spring months, than it is in the drier months later in the year. And you can see we had that drought going on last year where we were pretty close to having very little infiltration, very little inflow, almost right down to our sanitary estimates during September and October. So we can move to the next slide. So back to how does infiltration and inflow get into the system? So sources of infiltration are listed on the left. We're looking at cracked pipes, offset joints, leaking or broken service connections, or leaking manhole covers or manholes themselves. On the right, inflow comes from like cross connections in the storm drain system, or homeowners that have sump pumps connected directly to the sewer system. Interior drains like a floor drain in your basement, your roof leaders or downspouts going straight into the sewer, or an exterior drain like say in your driveway. So on the next slide, I found this graphic on the Norwalk, Connecticut Water Pollution Control Association on their website. It kind of just shows you where all this water can come from. And I just kind of wanted to make a note that if you're in the process of doing any like outreach or public education, there's a lot of stuff that's like already made online. Like I found this, lots of good stuff on a lot of websites. So I would take a look around. Okay, so next, we can further categorize inflow, since that's what we're focusing on today, into public versus private inflow. So the obvious sources of public inflow are manhole frames and covers, cross connections between sewers and drains, direct connections from catch basins right into the sewer system. And then on the private side, what we talked about already, sump pumps, open cleanouts in your basement, your sump pump, yeah, connected directly to your lateral, basement drains, roof leaders, downspouts, driveway, or yard drains. So moving on to removing these sources. So the public inflow is usually an easier issue to address because it's part of the community system. You have access to it. You can go check it out whenever you want, basically. For example, like replacing a manhole frame and cover is easier than gaining access to a private property and redirecting a sump pump across somebody's lawn. Communities, may have an easier time just dealing with their own things versus trying to get homeowners engaged. But now communities have been addressing their II for years, and a lot of those public inflow sources have already been addressed. So private inflow removal is complex. It requires extensive investigation, gaining access to private property. There's lots of communication and coordination required. And of course, you're going to run into reluctant homeowners. It involves dealing with lots of smaller sources versus one big source. And we all know there's always a chance that the source that you just went and removed may be reconnected after you leave. So moving on to the next slide, and we've gotten most of the big sources. Why do we still need to go after it? Well, we want to mitigate SSOs. We'd rather not have, water pouring out of manholes. We want to reclaim capacity in the sewer system. We want to reduce transportation and treatment costs. Remember, half of the flow that goes to Deer Island is clean water, and you're paying to transport and treat that clean water. So next slide. Just to talk about our rates briefly, we utilize a flow-based rate structure. So the pie chart on the left shows us that about 43% of the FY26 sewer assessment is based on population. So that means the remaining 57% is based on flow. So on the right, that same pie chart is broken down further to show you that it's your average wastewater flow, but it's also your maximum wastewater flow that come into that equation as well. So there's money involved here. So next up, Colleen Rizzi, who's MWRA's Director of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs, has a few things to say about wastewater flow challenges.
Thanks, Kristen, and thank you. Next slide. So we're faced with a number of challenges on the wastewater side related to our weather flows, as Kristen's mentioned. And one way we're looking to help mitigate those challenges in our existing service area is to implement I&I removal projects. Part of that removal, again, is to reclaim capacity in our collection system at our facilities, mitigating SSOs like we've talked about, and then helping to alleviate CSOs. As we look ahead to changing climate conditions, increased rain events, whether it be the intensity of the storm or prolonged duration or even frequency, this becomes more concerning, right? But we're looking also ahead to potentially changing regulatory requirements, whether that's more stringent treatment requirements, changing discharge limits. As already mentioned, 40 to 50% of the flows to Deer Island are related to I&I, and that flow also has to travel through other facilities to get there. MWRA has always been proactive when it comes to assessing the long-term needs of our system, both water and wastewater. And as we see increased development in member communities, or we're fielding requests for additional entities to join the system, we want to address and be clear about what capacity is available, and it's not much. This is why we're looking for I&I removal to be implemented before new flows enter the system. Some of you may have been on the advisory board meeting earlier this year when we discussed messaging to communities or to entities looking to discharge through our member communities with new sewer, where we are seeing an uptick in those requests over the last, say, 6 to 8 months. So our request of the advisory board members is to continue helping us get that message out before about the constraints in our system, so that it's reaching people early in the process before project proponents are spending a lot of money or time evaluating the feasibility of a project. We want to have those early discussions about the proposed flows, where they are in the system, the downstream impacts, and what mitigation is available, again, to make sure that flows are being offset before introducing them into the system. So for new projects outside of your community that are requesting to discharge to your system, please bring MWRA into the conversation early. We understand the community has to assess your own impacts to see if your system can handle it, but I don't think it's ever too early to have just that brief conversation about the constraints on the downstream end of your own community. So for development and redevelopment within your own community, the message is similar. We certainly don't want to restrict the ability to develop in member communities, but we are just looking for the mitigation of those increased flows. And if you are approached by a new community, an adjacent community that wants to discharge, please just direct them to MWRA. You can certainly message to them that we're not accepting new communities, but we are happy to have that conversation directly. So with that, I will take any questions. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Brian and Megan, I believe, to discuss Burlington's experience.
Thank you, Colleen. So our engineering division manages our II program. And so unfortunately, Megan's not here. She's tied up somewhere else. But I have Tom Hayes, our town engineer, here to give the presentation. And I also managed it for a number of years back when I was in engineering. So I can also jump in from time to time.
Good morning. So I'm Tom Hayes, town engineer. Megan is out in the field, stuck on a job, so I guess I'm filling in. So Burlington is a town. We have about 115 miles of sewer. Most of the sewer was built out in the late 60s, early 70s, and we really don't have a capacity problem. I think our system is designed for about 9 MGD, and I think we send between 3 and 4 down to Deer Island. The problem is restrictions downstream from us. So when we have a big rain event, we don't really have a CSO. We have to bypass pump out of our main pump station into Vinebrook. So we set up pumps and then we pump overboard. We have a deal with Woburn. So when the manhole down at Horn Pond starts to rise and discharge, then we pump overboard. So that's how the whole thing works. So if you go to the next slide, we've been under administrative consent order since the mid 1980s. So as part of the ACO, we're required to remove, at that time, we were required to move 10 to 1. So it was 10 to 1 required by the DEP. And then we added an extra 1 on for us. So if you're connecting to the sewer system, you'd have to do mitigation at a ratio of 11 to 1. And then we had this sewer bank set up. So that allowed, when the bank had enough capacity in it, we could start handing out connections to residents. Around the early 2000s, we worked with DEP and they actually let us kick that down to 4 to 1. And again, we still add 1 for the town. So it helps out the residents. The current rate is $2.50 per gallon multiplied times the ratio of 5, and that's what the fee for adding sewage into the system. That's the current fee right now. If you go to the next slide. So again, the residents pay a fee. It's typically, a bedroom is worth, I think, 110 gallons per bedroom. Is that correct, Brian?
110 gallons per bed.
Yeah. So we have a lot of redevelopment, a lot of people tearing down the ranches and capes and putting out these big houses. So 2-3 bedroom goes to 4 or 5 bedrooms. So they come in, they can drop off a check. Developers, on the other hand, they can pay if they're going to increase the flow by more than 1,000 GP gallons per day. They can pay a fee for half of it, and then they have to do mitigation. and they have their choice. They can, if we have, from our II studies, if we've identified inflow and infiltration, they can select those and they can do those. But the easiest way is sump pump. So we assign them. We have a list. And if you want to go to the next page, we have a list. We call it the amnesty list, and we have a list of these folks that have like come, first served. So if you sign up and you're the next on the list, then we assign that to the developer. And gaining trust with the residents was a big part of this, because we're the government, we're here to help you, and people are not trusting. So it took a lot of time to gain their trust, and over the course of many years. I mean, this started in the 1980s, and there was a lot of door-to-door visits to see how these see if these people had sump pumps, and like everywhere else, you don't want to let someone into your house if you have something illegal. So it took a long time to gain trust, but I mean, people call all the time, and they're familiar with the program and they're willing to sign up. Want to go to the next slide?
I'll also add another way to kind of get access. When your staff goes in to do final water meter reads or water meter replacements, we were also tying in inspections to identify if there was sump pump, illicit sump pump connections. So that's also another way. If people are hesitant to let you in, you can kind of build it into that structure and hold up perhaps the sale of a house, and it's a slower process, but that's a method for communities that have trust problems with their residents.
So how does this program work? So we have a three-way agreement. So we have an agreement that the contractor signs, or actually the developer signs, his contractor, whoever's doing the work, and the town. I'm sorry, let me back up. The resident, the contractor, and the town sign the agreement. So we all agree what is going to happen, so there's no surprises. The contractor will be assigned sump pumps. The first on the list, whether it's an easy connection or a $30,000 connection, they own that connection. So they do all the coordination. They'll contact the homeowner. Homeowners, they know they're on the list, so it's not a surprise when they get a knock on the door or they get a letter from the contractor saying, "Hey, we're here to do the work." They go, they draw up a sketch of how they make this connection, whether the connection goes out to the drain, or if it's discharged in the backyard, or it might be like an on-site system, like an infiltration system. So we all agree that this is what is going to happen. They hire a licensed contractor to do the connection. If it's an on-site system, it has to be designed. We don't want them just to say, we're going to do a dry well. It has to be designed by a professional engineer. They'll have to do test pits, see where the groundwater is, see what the soils are like. And then if there's a problem, if there's something, if the homeowner wants a gold-plated sump pump, that's unreasonable. So we will arbitrate any sort of problems between the contractor and the resident. Next slide. So the contractor is responsible, and I'm using contractor interchangeable with the developer, because the developer hires a contractor, so they both kind of they have to work together to get the sump pump done. So they're required to do all the work, and they pick up all the costs. So once it's all done, there's a closeout package. So photographs, sketches, so that we know where the sump pump is, we know where it discharges to. So if there's a problem in the future, we'll have it on file. And then again, we do the inspection, and then we require a 1-year warranty for the sump pump in case there's a problem. Next slide. So the contractor gets 1,200 gallons per day credit towards the sewer allocation. It's equivalent to about $15,000 purchase price. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes, if the homeowner just wants the hose stuck out the window, that's great. It's pretty cheap. We've had ones that actually cost $30,000. They had to run down the street to connect into the drain system. So, obviously the resident doesn't have an illegal connection. We remove the flow, and then we are not directly liable for that connection. So it kind of gives us some, liability. Like we're not, if there's an issue, we go back to the contractor to fix it. Next slide. So it works for us. We have, Burlington, the tax base is like 2/3 commercial, retail. So we have a lot of, over the course of the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years, we've had a lot of folks coming to the town wanting to do development. So for a residential community, it might not be suitable because of the high cost of doing the sump pump redirect. Again, trust is huge. It took a long time for the residents to trust us. We keep this amnesty list, and we will not give it to anybody. We've had DEP ask us for the list. And we said, no, it's, we have to protect the residents because, we told them that we would do this at no cost and no liability to them. Another problem that kind of popped up, we get the phone call a lot, is like, why are redirecting this person who has an illegal connection when I have a legal one? Mine goes out in the backyard, but we have to try to explain that, well, you don't have an illegal connection. Redirecting you doesn't do us any benefit. It doesn't give us sewer credit, so it doesn't work. So that's kind of a question we get all the time. And then finally, there's a stormwater, high groundwater problem, flooding problem in the area. There's concerns about adding more water into the drain system. Next slide. Hey, and that is it. If you have any questions, Brian and I will try to answer those questions.
How do you determine the best discharge location suitable for the resident and the town?
We require that the sump pump be directed into the drain at a structure. So we don't do, you can't just put a saddle on a drain line. They have to connect into a catch basin or a manhole. If they don't have access, say if they're adjacent to a wetland, the contractor may have to go to the Concom and get a permit from them, like file a notice of intent to discharge into that wetland. And then if it's on site, then again, the has to be designed by a professional engineer and has to work. A lot of times where you have a sump pump, you have areas of high groundwater. So we have a handful of on-site systems because typically the site is too wet.
And does the contractor bear the cost for the engineering?
Yep, they require to do anything, all the costs, all the permitting, all the engineering, all the construction.
So yeah, we put the worry, as I think Colleen may have mentioned, was people reconnecting. So we tried to put a lot of time thinking of the ways to keep people from having problems after the work was done, and then they'll just throw it in. So everything, we don't allow any above ground hoses or anything. Everything has to be buried. Above ground is too much chance to cause damage, and then they're not going to fix that. They'll just dump it back into the connection they had. And then on-site systems, even more so, if they don't install something with correctly in the proper soils, and the yard becomes a swimming hole, they're going to throw it back into the sewer. So having a PE design it and doing test pits, hopefully that ensures that it's going to handle most of the rainstorms and prevent people from reconnecting.
So after the initial sign off by the town and the 1-year warranty period, is there any point which the town goes back and re-inspects or, determines, whether, how successful the program is?
No.
Usually that resident will we've had a few with issues that come up, and they'll usually reach out to us to try to get us to fix the problem before they go ahead and perhaps abandon it. So I think with the lack of that reach out, I think we kind of assume that it's been pretty successful.
How does this affect the capacity for your drainage system that's already in place and was designed years ago?
I really haven't seen any impact on the drainage. I think the concern is more anecdotal that, we're adding more flow into the system. But, our system, the drainage system is pretty, well, 1960s, 1970s when it was all built out. We do have a lot of corrugated metal, but no, I think I really haven't seen any impact on the drains.
Thank you.
So was there any measurable drop in the inflow amount since the program started?
I think that's hard to quantify. Our flow was between 3 and and 4 MGD. I don't know, Brian, do you have any insight?
Well, one gauge I think is presumably the MWRA assessment for sewer, and so when we look at the max, the peak flows, peak months, we've been trending down. So I think that's, you know, the money speaks. So unless other communities are having a large increase, presumably we're having success decreasing it. Yeah, I mean, I guess some pumps is hard. I mean, you know, the 1,200 gallons per day, we kind of met with DEP to review. At one point, it was we were getting 500 gallons per day, and coincidentally, they were reviewing the credit for that as well. And we had thrown together some rough estimates from, you know, whatever 3/4 horsepower sump pump you get at Home Depot, and tried to come up with a number. So obviously, depending on the situations, a sump pump, you know, unless you're metering it, it's, you know, some might only go off once a month, some might go off all the time. So it's you know, we could estimate it based on that average, but without, you know, we started working ourselves away from flow metering because we weren't really finding you know, we weren't finding sub areas that had large peaks, and we were investing all this money into trying to identify II rather than, you know, what we progressed into is a CIP style project where we just focus on areas that we haven't looked at all, and go in and TV and just start fixing all the issues that we find, and putting the money into actually fixing things rather than trying to flow meter. So yeah, unfortunately, recently we probably don't have a lot of the quantifiable data to document how much we've removed.
Brian, how many pumps have been disconnected since the inception of the program?
Well, I think I don't have an exact number. I don't know if you do, Brian. I mean, it's been really hundreds of sump pumps have been redirected over the course of, you know, since the late 80s. I mean, we could dive into the files, but nothing like, I don't have anything I can give you at the moment.
Sorry, yeah, I'll try to quickly find something, and if we're moving on to the next present, I'll throw it in the chat just so everyone can see.
I think we have a quiz question next. Here we go. So what is the definition of private inflow? Flow from residential buildings, flow from industrial facilities, flow from downspouts, yard drains or sump pumps, or flow from business or commercial facilities. So you can go ahead and choose your answer and hit submit. So the correct answer was the third option there, flow from downspouts, yard drains, or sump pumps. Moving on, next up we have Nick Rystrom from Revere, who's going to talk about their program. Nick?
And while we're pulling up those slides, just in case folks are on audio or only or didn't see it in the chat, we will make sure that we have copies of these slides and a recording of this session on our website at some point. So,
good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Nick Rystrom. I'm the city engineer here in Revere. Just a quick background. The City of Revere entered into a consent decree back in 2010 with regard to the Clean Water Act that required us to essentially remove extraneous flow from the system. We started with, as some of those before me mentioned, infiltration, which was rehab CIPP work in our system. And then we also embarked on a more complex inflow removal program. It started with our own public inflow removal, and then started with private inflow. For us, and you can see by the map there that Revere has significant amount of flood zone, and we're a coastal community, so there's a lot of high groundwater. So we run into a lot of sump pumps and things of that nature. Next slide, please. So this is just some pictures of some of the sources that you might find. You mentioned earlier some broken structure frames and covers. We did some smoke testing in our system, so you can see some catch basins and area drains that were connected. Next slide, please. So from the beginning, we need to be able to enforce some of the discharges that we were encountering. So the first thing was to amend our city ordinances to allow us to then enforce what we were trying to correct. Following that, we established an amnesty program. This, among other reasons, was to try to promote participation. The amnesty basically was, let us come in and take a look, and it will be of no cost to you, and you won't be penalized for, having an illicit discharge or an illegal connection. That really helped us, be able to get into a lot of properties. Unfortunately, there are still some folks that were not trusting of the city and, still would not let us in. But as we went through that, we then would, start to conduct inspections to, kind of give ourselves a baseline. Some of the biggest pieces of the amnesty was to provide outreach. We used a lot of different methods. Water bills, we added some literature in our water bills. We took out some newspaper ads. Obviously, we had it on the city website. And a few years back, we also had a meter replacement program, and so we included it in that as well. Next slide, please. So the idea was to try to inspect, all properties in the city, and then, document them and try to track them as we're, removing, as many as we do year after year. The tracking is very important. You need to make sure that we are aware of what's in existence and then what is being removed, and we have to document what did get removed, so that in the event that someone decides they are going to put it, reinstate a connection that shouldn't be there, then we have information that we did in fact remove it in some capacity prior to that. On this slide, you can see just some of the results of our inspection. We conducted a total of just under 11,000, which is just shy of the entire city. We have just over 11,000 properties. Some of them were found to be illegal. Some of them we found were actually legal. And then there were some that also were inconclusive at the time and that required some type of follow-up inspection. Of those, thus far, you can see that we are able to redirect 744. Next slide, please. This is just a few examples of what we're finding in some of the residential houses here in Revere. You can see some pump connections directly to interior plumbing. A lot of times there were hard piped into a clean out in the basement or into a stack or other plumbing in the house. And in some cases, there were movable discharges, like you'll see on the right there, which was into a sink in the basement. Sometimes we had ones where people would discharge them out a window in the summer, but they would bring them in, in the winter and discharge them into a slop sink or something to that effect. Next slide, please. In addition to the sump pumps, other sources we encountered and looked at were roof drains and roof leaders. A lot of the roof drains were on more, larger properties, larger residential properties, and then also commercial properties. You can see on the bottom right, that's a school. And on some of the residential properties also, there's a connection of roof leaders, from a gutter that in some cases were piped back into the house and then tied into the drain. Into the interior plumbing. So we had a couple of different options for redirection. Early on, we looked at redirection to splash style setups, and then also to infiltration basins. In the first, I don't know, first or second contracts that we put out, we did a handful of those. We found, and I think, this may be not unique, but, significant to Revere, we're an urban community, has a lot of pavement, and that sort of, those types of materials. And so when we're redirecting to splash setups or infiltration basins, we found that in some cases, it caused a problem. So we were able to get the flow out of the system, but then it caused some other problem. So maybe there was an icing problem that happened in the winter, or if it was an infiltration basin, if the groundwater is really high there, then it caused the yard to be kind of like a swimming pool for a lot of the year. And so those ones, we actually ended up going back and redirecting them to provide a hard connection to a drain in the street, usually, or an extension of some type. The other two, and this is what we've been doing for the last, I would say, 9 or 10 contracts that we put out, we are redirecting them directly to a catch basin or a mainline pipe that's in the street, or in some cases, if there's enough of these that exist on a single street, then we'll install an extension of the drain system so that we can then tie a handful of those into somewhere. We're really got away from the splash setup. Again, like I said, it had caused us some problems where we are creating other problems, even though we solved the problem that we initially were out to solve. So this, you can see, we started, again, I said the consent decree for us was agreed upon in 2010. We started our initial private inflow removal contract in 2012, and we have done just about 1 to 2 a year since then. You can see the status on the right, and then the costs associated. There's a good amount of variation there. In some cases, those contracts were, somewhere $1 million. In other places, it was, much lower, a couple $100,000. But overall, we were able to remove significant inflow in each one of those contracts. You can see some of them were upwards of 100 sump pumps, and in some cases, there's parking lots and other private inflow sources. So this slide just shows a few examples of some of the bid items that we used and that were developed through the years of bidding construction contracts related to sump pumps and other private inflow removal. As you might imagine, there's a lot of variation. Every house is different. Some people have their basement is finished, and there's some interior work that has to happen. In some cases, properties are larger, and there's more opportunity for trenching with a machine versus by hand. We did utilize a lot of the investigation tools in order to make sure that we could nail down a lot of what was needed for each one of these. That included CCTV work, cleaning out of the system in the street to see if it was able to handle new connections. And in some cases, we did some test bits for, to see if there was any obstructions or interaction with other utilities. And then, as I mentioned, there's different components for each house. Maybe we're coring through a foundation, maybe you're coring through a sill, maybe you're able to get out in a different way. What we tried to do is, at any property that we were at, we tried to capture all of their potential sources. So that would be roof leaders, area drains, roof drains, sump pumps, all at once. And the other part of that was to try to prevent any reconnection. We would hard pipe all of our work so that it was very difficult to kind of undo. Next slide. So this is just an example of some of the design sheets that we had provided in our bid package for each one of these contracts. You'll see on the next slide, there's some other exterior work, but this is for interior work to a house. We'll show the sump pump and where it's connected, the fact that we're going to be disconnecting it and providing a plug to that connection, and then some type of a penetration through the foundation and a trench out to a new manhole or a new catch basin or an existing one for that matter. But it's important to have this be as detailed as possible so that contractor knows what they're responsible for. And what we also did was provide this to the homeowner so that they also are aware of exactly what work is happening. For us, we actually made sure that the homeowner viewed this and signed off along with myself or somebody with my staff so that there was no confusion or disagreement after the fact as to what actually was the scope of the redirection. Next slide, please. This, as I said, is just a design example for exterior work. We did a lot of improvements and extensions to our existing system so as to be able to then discharge or connect some pumps and other things and provide that a place to be redirected. There is still some parts of the city that do not have a stormwater collection system in the street. And so those we're gradually adding extensions so that we can redirect some pumps that right now are illegal but have nowhere to be discharged to. But these are ones that we would include in a design package along with the previous slide. So just some of the things to consider for a successful program. Something that I mentioned, the Burlington folks mentioned is, trust and, the general property access that goes with that. Some people just are not trustworthy or they don't trust the city, that we're not looking for other things. They didn't want to let us in because maybe they have an illegal apartment or something else. So we had a lot of conversations with people. We tried really hard to educate about why we were there, what our goal was. There was a lot of flyers and literature that we also provided. Another part of that to try to promote participation is the offer of an amnesty program, and how that helps everybody. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is the amount of inflow that is sent to Deer Island and is cleaned. So we have clean water that's being cleaned, and that obviously costs the city and other municipalities a lot of money, which then is obviously relayed to the residents and the ratepayers. What I had mentioned earlier also is the importance of keeping track of a lot of our findings and our redirections. We have a GIS that we use for all of our utilities, and we're able to incorporate the inflow removal information and documentation within that. So it's easy for us to see what properties maybe have an illicit connection, excuse me, what properties have been redirected already. And then we can look, if somebody says, hey, there's a problem here, and we find that somebody had redirected their sump pump back to an illegal connection, then we can say, hey, we redirected this once already. Now it's going to be on the homeowner to correct it the second time. Another thing to consider is just the design. I mentioned the hard piping to make sure, or to try to make sure that some of this work could not be undone. Other considerations as far as design goes are for one-way check valves. we put on a lot of the sump pump discharges so that if there was in fact a problem in the street system, it didn't, back up and manifest itself in a private property. Again, the other part of that too is we instituted, where as much as we can, the use of air gaps, so that if again there was a problem in the in the street, it wasn't going to cause a problem for the homeowner. After it's all said and done, we also executed a closeout package with each one of the residents, so that they have the understanding that we did all this work. We'll basically repair it or deal with any issues for a year, but after that, it becomes their responsibility to maintain. If the sump pump, craps out 3 years from now, it's not going to be the city's responsibility to come and replace that sump pump. So there was some conversations about that. And again, as far as inspection, design, and then especially construction, I can't stress the importance of outreach. People want to know what's going on, even if they're receiving, bad news. I think most people would rather have that bad news than have, be up in the air and not know what's happening. And so, as far as construction goes, we put together, in addition to other literature, these trifolds. And if you want to just go to the next slide, you'll see an example of what we distribute for each one of our projects to let people know where the work's going to be happening, what is actually going to be happening, what the schedule is going to be, and then provide some amount of contact so that, if people have questions, hey, my street is highlighted, am I included? Or, hey, you're doing the street next to me, what about, my street? Give people a chance to contact us and ask about any of the things that we're doing.
So next up, we have a couple folks from my staff. Israel and Gloria are going to talk about our II Financial Assistance Program briefly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Israel Alvarez, and I manage the MWRA's II Financial Assistance Program. Next slide, please. Due to timing, I'm going to quickly go over some of the highlights of the program. This table summarizes all of the funds we have available through our program for each community and the amount of funds that we have distributed to each community through December 2024. Over $1 billion has been approved for the II program over time. Funds are added every few years in different phases. There have been 16 phases added so far. Through December last year, 2024, a total of $566 million has been distributed to fund 688 I&I projects. That includes planning projects, studies, investigations, design work, and construction projects. This chart shows each phase of the II program and the timeline when they were authorized by the Board of Directors. The II Financial Assistance Program began back in FY '93. As mentioned before, the board has approved 16 phases of funding totaling just over $1 billion. And that includes grants and interest-free loans. Phases 1 through 7 have been completed. And the more current phases 9 through 14, and phase 16 are given as 75% grant and 25% interest-free loan with a 10-year repayment. This slide gives a brief overview of our funding process. When a community applies for funds through our program, they'll have a project that's ready to go with designs, specifications, contracts, bids. Most communities have an I&I sewer program based on an analysis or study, and they'll regularly apply for funds to complete each phase of their program. We do require town meeting approval or city council vote to authorize the borrowing of funds from MWRA. Most communities have to plan in advance to get town meeting approval in the springtime or in the fall. We distribute funds on a quarterly basis. We target dates in mid-February, May, August, and November. And applications for funding are due 1 month prior to the target funding date. Once an application gets approved, funds are transferred to the community designated MMDT account, which is set up specifically for the MWRA's II program. Our staff will track the funds for the project throughout the life of the project with the help of community staff and their consultants. We'll collect invoices, payment applications, progress reports, and just to track all the funds that were given for the project. Next, we're going to have Gloria, who also helps manage the program, go over a couple more slides.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gloria Kazara, project manager in the community support program. I work alongside Israel. I'll be highlighting some key program stats in the next few slides. So for planning and inspection projects, besides TV inspection, flow isolation, and smoke testing projects, we have funded the inspection of over 70,000 sewer manholes and more than 79,000 buildings. Below we have a video clip showing a sewer TV inspection capturing signs of infiltration. So I don't know if we can get to see the video clip. Yeah, right there. So that's signs of infiltration in the sewer. Next slide. So speaking of infiltration, we have funded sewer replacements, lining projects, and repair initiatives. This includes the installation of 365 miles of cured-in-place pipe liner and the repair of over 20,000 service laterals. So the images show the before and after repair of a cracked pipe by installation of cured-in-place liner. So for next slide, sorry. For Inflow, we have funded the rehabilitation of nearly 25,000 manholes and the replacement of over 4,000 manhole covers. For Inflow, so for private Inflow, we have funded the redirection of 500 sump pumps and the disconnection of nearly 59,000 downspouts and area drains. So these images show rehabilitated manholes. If the images displayed above, below, sorry, if you can see those. Kristen will now discuss the impacts of these efforts to the system flows. Thank you.
I just want to add to the sump pump stat that Gloria posted, talked about, that we were going through some records. Israel was looking through some projects, and we funded the design of a lot of the removal and investigation work, but not necessarily the removal itself. So the numbers, you know, are probably higher than what we have there. So this, I just wanted to throw a graph up here quickly. I know the big question is, can we quantify what we've been doing? So this is a long-term regional flow graph that depicts the gradual decrease in flow to Deer Island. So the lighter line is the annual flow to Deer Island, and the darker brown line is the 5-year running average. And the blue bars at the bottom represent the total annual rainfall. Now, it's not a complete picture because flows are also dependent on how, when, and where that rain falls. But in general, the greater the rainfall total, the greater the flow volume to Deer Island. So IRI removal is a difficult issue for us to quantify because we have competing projects going on all the time. Our communities and in areas of our system, we're working hard to keep that extraneous water out. But we also have CSO communities, and in those areas, we're working to keep the CSO flow in. And then there's the water use factor, where we know water use has decreased over the years. So, but on this trend, overall, you can see that flows have come down quite a bit. If you look at the beginning, of the trend, like say the first 10 years, 4 of those years saw average daily flows over 400 MGD. 5 of those years were between 350 and 400, and only 1 year dropped below 350 MGD. Now, if you look at the last 10 years on this trend, the average daily flow didn't even get close to 400. And in only 2 of those years was it over 350. And 4 of the years it dropped below 300. So, you can see flows are coming down, even with rainfall that's similar. So next up, we have our next quiz question. Let's see, what do we have? So what projects are eligible for funding under the II Financial Assistance Program? Manhole inspections, catch basin disconnections, sump pump removal, or all of the above? Go ahead and submit your answers. So the answer was the last option, all of the above. So hopefully we all got that. In the interest of time, we had another little piece on what MWRA is doing for II, but it is not private inflow related. So I think we'll cut that there and maybe take questions. If anybody has questions for Nick or about the II program, feel free to throw them out there now.
I'm not seeing any virtual. Oh, I do see one now. Looks like William Branton. Hand us up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if any, if through your program, or if you're aware of any communities that require sewer lines to be replaced at time of sale or transfer for either the age of the pipe based on an inspection report or the material of the pipe, like if it's old clay or cast iron piping.
So that's not something that is required in Revere. I am not aware of any other communities that that require that. If anyone else has any input into their community, but I'm not aware of any.
We've
right up.
started doing it for Town of Situate at time of sale or transfer based on clay or cast iron or asbestos concrete materials. All those materials in our community were installed over 50 years ago beyond the useful life of the material. So our town requires a policy for those to be replaced with PVC. It's relatively new, so I don't really have any findings to report yet, but I was curious to see if others have been doing anything similar.
Okay. I see some other hands.
I just have a quick question related to the funding available to the cities and towns. If the II work is only a portion of the project, are you able to submit for sort of just that portion of a project that has a scope that extends well beyond specifically II removal?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. We do give funds for those type of projects. We have a water program that's coexists with our sewer program, and sometimes communities who are doing large water sewer projects will apply to both programs to receive funds. But we will have to distinguish which parts are specific to the II program and which ones are specific to the water program.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
You'd ask Mr. Galso, jump in and say, if Situate would share their ordinance with us, we'll share it with all the communities.
I have a question for Israel. Is there a time where if a community doesn't use the money where it might lose it, especially for some of those older phases of the program?
Yeah, some of the older phases had sunset dates where they had to use, like, for example, the phase 7 money sunset back in 2021, but we were able to get all the communities to use that money before that time. For the last 5 or so phases, they won't have a sunset date for another 10 years at least. So hopefully we won't have to, hopefully communities will be able to use all of their money.
Kevin, it's a pretty popular program. So we have, most communities take their money right away. And then we have some that have difficulty maybe getting a project together. Takes a little bit longer, but we don't usually have trouble getting the money out the door.
Israel, Pat Fastenal, Walpole.
Hi.
Oh, it's hard to know if you can hear me or not. We charge an I&I fee, or we used to anyway, which kind of makes sense to me that the people who are putting in the material should be responsible for taking out some of the I&I. But you're telling me we have a fund that we can connect into and maybe not charge an I&I fee? Is that what I'm hearing?
So our program, we have available funds for the communities to use for any sewer rehabilitation projects. I don't know, Kristen or Steve, if you want to jump in. I don't think we.
Yeah, it doesn't take the place of your II funds that you're, the fees that you're charging. This is just a program that we offer back to the communities to help them rehabilitate their system. It doesn't really impact your II fees that the community charges.
Okay. Why doesn't it? Say that again?
It's a grant and a loan from MWRA. It doesn't have anything to do with that work.
The towns can use this money to do I&I remediation, correct?
Yes.
And when we charge entities that come onto our sewer system, we charge them because we're going to be using that money to fund remediation.
Yes, you're going to use that money to offset the flow that they're bringing into the system.
That is correct. So
yes. Our money is in addition to that.
So you wouldn't recommend that we give up an I&I fee?
No.
And just borrow the money?
No.
Or get the grant?
Right. Well, you can get the grant, but it doesn't take the place of your developer fees. No.
Okay. I don't quite understand that, but I hear what you're saying.
Right, that might be worthwhile, a one-on-one conversation sometime later in the week.
Does anyone else have any questions? So I think we're good. I think we're ready. We're done for the day. Thanks so much for coming and listening. If you do have questions, you can feel free to reach out to me or to Israel, about our programs, or the advisory board will have the presentations, I believe, on their website.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this special episode of ABTV. To get the full picture, including slides, data, and visuals from the workshop, head to our website at MWRAadvisoryboard.com and watch the video version or download information from the meeting. We've got more in the pipeline, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for what's next.